maybe we should wait a couple seconds and I can do a little history for other people.
Sure, as you wish. We're
Yeah, let's do
recording
that.
now. And
Maybe I'll give it a little more detail in a second. It's a pretty interesting story. And hopefully we're at a point where we can really help the river again.
yeah.
That's
So I
really
get to say hi to David Grenfell.
Hey, Andy. How's it going?
Oh,
Wow.
good.
Haven't seen David for a while.
Me neither.
Conclusion.
Are you okay?
I'm still working my way through those books you see in the background.
Yes.
Good morning, Jennifer. Hey, David.
Hi, guys.
Wow, this is cool. This is so cool. All of you. Hey, Kier and Carol. Hi. The residents of Bell County.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I'm gonna get in better light here, I think.
And of course, hi, Felicity.
All right. The
Where's
crew is
Felicity? There she is.
assembling.
You want to sit down?
Come out of the screen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
And good. Hilario's on. I just talked to him. That's good.
Oh, nice.
Carl,
Yes. Good morning.
good morning.
Are you from the wilds of Colorado?
Beautiful.
Oh,
I
man.
am. Here, look,
The Mancos Valley, the most
Water.
beautiful valley in Colorado.
water everywhere. It's just that people mute themselves so that we can hear a little more clearly and while people are talking, so it doesn't have so much interference.
Yeah. Actually, I can. I have this power. I can mute everybody. But we set it up. Everybody can unmute themselves, so it's not like if I don't see someone raising their hand, then we'll do that. So Alex is here, and Mike and Efren from the city.
Welcome.
Welcome. I'm here.
Thank you. Oh, well, you're in a beautiful location. Where the heck are you?
I'm in the mountains above Felicity.
No way. You're not kidding, are you?
No, I'm not. That's a fake backdrop. You can actually add on Zoom. You can add it, and I go back and forth on knowing how to do that.
Yeah,
It
Good.
works.
yeah. You can create a green screen, so you can put any background. As you look at
That would be pretty cool.
Patricio has the City of Santa Fe Water Division logo behind him.
Okay, cool. Wow. Nice. Hey, Patricio.
Hey, Carl.
How you doing? Good to see
Doing
you.
well, thank you. Good to see you.
So Carl, so we have 20 people on now.
Wow. Okay.
Um,
Let's give it 5 minutes and we'll start.
I think I was just going to say the same thing, so that's cool. And then when you say okay, I'll mute everybody so that we
Okay.
can all hear your wonderful voice clearly.
Yeah. Good luck.
Everybody, I tell everybody has their own ability to unmute themselves.
Okay.
And also, if you have any, use the chat room is a real easy way to say, Andy, I'm not seeing or hearing or whatever or something, and
Okay.
do something on that. And make sure we tell people too, and I'll say it again, we're recording all this. So keep your language clean.
Yeah. No cussing.
Yeah. And if we do get Zoom bombed kind of stuff, then Carl just say, we're ending the meeting right now, and I can do that. I can stop the meeting.
Okay. Hopefully we won't get their
I
attention.
know, who would want to Zoom bomb us, But Alex may remember, wasn't it the PRC state committee meeting that got Zoom bombed about?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's using it now for their meetings, even the Interstate Stream Commission, and it's like, wow, 5 hours of Zoom.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
I promise we won't go that long.
See if I got everybody on here though. I don't have 19 people, so
Yeah, just went up to 20.
20.
Felicity came back.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
You look like you're driving a jet, Andy.
You look like I'm what?
You look like you're driving a jet.
Yeah. Okay, Felicity, you're cut off. Ooh,
That power.
Okay, so Bobby's here. Hi, Bobby. Oh, she can't hear me because her headset's not in. Hi, Bobby.
Hi, Andy.
It's nice to see everybody.
Hi, Commissioner Hansen. Nice to see you.
Someone's coming in by phone.
We can hear you, Bobby.
You can't hear me? Hold on.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, you can. Okay, good. All right, good.
And there's Andrew.
Oh,
Hi,
yeah.
Andrew.
Hi. I'm good.
Hey, all right. One of my favorite characters in one of my favorite movies, man.
Yeah, that's the danger of using your personal computer for work, right?
Oh. Wow.
I'm going to get some water.
Changed your background.
Oops, I lost everyone.
No, you didn't.
Well, I'm not seeing you anymore.
Can hear you.
Where
We can
did
see
you
you.
go? Hold on. I might have to join you again.
No, you don't need to.
Hold on. Oh, here we go. There. Hi.
Hi. So Andy, it's 5 minutes. You want to start?
Yep, there you go.
Okay.
I'll just say a couple things. I'm going to mute everybody to start. You can unmute yourselves. And if for some reason you're having a challenge with that, kind of wave at me or something, and I'll try it. I can see everybody on one screen, which is great. And it is being recorded. And if Carl, we're getting too much background noise, he'll probably ask me to mute everybody again, and we'll kind of, do that process. So I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody, and Carl can start. Okay, Carl?
All right. And really, this is kind of for Olivia's. It's just kind of a rundown or history of the collaborative. I'm pretty sure we're going into our 8th year. And it started as a result of a grant that the U.S. Forest Service had to do a restoration project from the wastewater treatment plant all the way down to La Bajada. The U.S. Forest Service had a meeting up in Espanola, and the only applicants at the time were the Wild Earth Guardians. And when the U.S. Forest Service realized that there wasn't a whole lot of support for the Wild Earth Guardians to take on this project, we create what we call a stakeholder group. And that grant kind of went away, but we as a group stayed together. And the reason we stayed together is because we're all concerned about the river, the water in the river, and the history and traditions and all the things that go along with that river and what's happened to it over the years. And really, I think that the goal of our group, and we say this a lot, is we want a consistent, steady flow of clean water coming down the river that meets all of the needs of the people that have depended on it for centuries for agricultural purposes, but also for the riparian environment, a healthy riparian environment. And we're concerned right now that that's not the case, and there are a number of different factors that contribute to that. But one of the things I want to say to start off, and I really want to thank Alex because I think he's been a leader in this, in bringing in more of the city folks. Michael and Efren, I'm really glad you're a part of this now because I think that's so important and something we haven't had before. And I think we're all committed to the same goal, is to see what we can do to improve and make that river healthy again. And there's a host of challenges before us. Some things that we can do short term, some things that are going to take a lot of money in long term. But I think for the first time in my experience with this group, I really feel we have everybody participating, and we have the people involved who have the ability to make some big decisions and for us to move forward. But I don't want to forget to thank Andy and the Watershed Association for hosting this meeting. I mean, this is, to me, is so cool. And just such a great way to be able to get together and talk about some very complex and serious issues. And with that, I'd like to invite Michael and Efren to talk a little bit, if they feel comfortable, in how things are going with the treatment plant. They're the ones that run the place. They're the ones that have had to deal with all the various challenges and equipment issues and all those kinds of things. So if they could give us just a kind of rundown about what's going on, plans for the future, how things are going now, that would be great.
So at the moment, we are in compliance. We, as yesterday, our fecal results were about 22 and our E. coli were 28. So that's way under our permitted limits. We have had some issues with our disc filters. We've got 2 of those units repaired, and another unit has gone down, but that one is hopefully set to be repaired in the next fiscal year, which is coming up. So
Efren, are these systems just old?
yes, they're very old. It's what, 25, almost 30 years?
Yeah, easily 30, or well, everything's either 10 to 25 years, except for the digesters that were just put in this year.
Wow. That's really a challenge to get that old equipment running then.
Well, most of the old equipment is working fine, running now, but we are waiting come July, sometime, possibly mid-July. We have another contractor coming on site to start replacing and doing our actual aeration project that's bringing it all back into here and now instead of being old equipment. The basins are all the same, but connections to the basins, aerators, valving put in that can be remotely adjusted and changed, a complete SCADA system that can control it. So it will be pretty much taken out of the hands of operators having to remember exactly at 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. or whatever time to go turn a valve and open it. The computer can do it for us.
So a lot of the system is going to pick up the slack, and it's going to be making changes every 10, 15 minutes instead of going off of hours. So those changes, that's what the operations crew has had to face, is being on top of it constantly, making sure, you know, that they're checking their test results, just doing rounds around the facility, just making sure everything's working properly. And it's a big challenge to operate an older facility.
So on top of that portion, like how, you know, just adding on to what Efren was saying, instead of operators having to go out and do manual testing, you know, every few hours, we're putting in some other equipment that will be doing the actual testing in the process on an instant. So every 15 minutes, we'll have a result on things like dissolved oxygen inside of the water. What that'll help us do is, instead of making changes to aeration every few hours, the control valves for that aeration can be directly linked to the process testing equipment and make the adjustments on the fly.
So you're really modernizing the plant.
Yes, we are.
Would it be nice to have a new one?
Really, other than the basins, this will kind of make it a new one in a sense.
You're getting there. All right, so
usually the case is we'll get something placed in our facility, but by the time it's installed, there's always something that's new that comes out.
Gotcha.
Most equipment and any process for any kind of industry is kind of working like computers used to be, that tomorrow there's a new design and a bigger and better system.
And more expensive probably too.
Yeah. So really making it work with what we have, and part of it retrofitting, but the other portion is just replacing it with new and making it something that's more reliable, more robust, is really where we're trying to push for.
Okay. You know, and Efren, one of my questions has been when you're out of compliance, I mean, it's one of those things where a little bit, a lot, and how that contributes to what happens going through the wetlands and how it comes out the other side.
So
that might be a little better question for Alex.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Alex.
Yeah, can you restate that? Because you're saying that when we're out of compliance, is that a reflection of the wastewater quality?
Yeah. How far out of compliance is the plant, and how that contributes to what comes out on the other side of the wetlands?
Well, actually, we found, we did a modeling study 2 years ago when we were looking at nutrients and nutrient removal.
Okay.
And we found out that even though the effluent does have an effect on the nutrients downstream from the wastewater treatment plant, even when we were able to reach lower and lower limits on nutrients or lower and lower values, that once it left the wetlands, it was back up above the state standard or the state's proposed standard for us. And so between the wastewater treatment plant and the wetlands, we might have been at a 0.02, but as soon as it hit the wetlands, we were back above 1 again, parts per million. And so the wetlands, I mean, it obviously affects the stream, our effluent obviously affects the stream quality. And I'm sure that the nutrients that have been basically loaded into the wetland substrate is the result of what we're discharging from the plant. And so over time, you know, the last, actually that plant's over 30 years old and it was upgraded in the 1990s. It's probably, we've probably banked a lot of nutrients in those wetland areas. And because there's really no removal of nutrients from the wetlands other than as our wastewater goes through, it picks up some of the nutrients in dissolved form. We still have a huge, I'll call it sump of nutrients there. So overall, obviously it affects the nutrient concentrations, but I think you've been asking a lot about the E. coli and fecal coliform limits.
Right.
So I'm not sure exactly, there's 2 limits that we have to deal with. One is the groundwater limit that applies to the water that's sent over to the golf course for a land application.
Right.
And that limit is basically with regards to total coliform, fecal coliform, whereas the limit for the NPDES permit is based on the concentration of E. coli. And so you could be out of compliance with one, but not necessarily the other, because one
Exactly, yeah.
yeah. And so every time Mike is out of compliance, Mike and Efren are out of compliance with fecal coliform limits, it doesn't necessarily mean they're out of compliance with the NPDES limits at the same time, but they may be. And I don't have that data in front of me to tell you exactly how many times that happens, but it doesn't always happen, I can tell you that.
Okay. Now, you mentioned, you call it now a nutrient sump, which I think is probably a more appropriate term. Should that be removed periodically and should be replaced? We are concerned, obviously, about what comes out of the wetlands. We're also concerned about residential wells that are in the general vicinity of that. And are those the kinds of things that we start to worry about, whether or not those 30 years of nutrients flowing through there that have created this sump now are causing problems for wells and causing problems for the people who use the water below the plant. Is any testing being done of the water coming out of the wetlands?
We tested it during that study that was done 2 years ago. And so there were a number of sampling points on down the river. I think in total, do you remember, Mike, four locations?
I don't remember, Alex. I wasn't part of that. I was still at the Buckman treatment plant.
So yeah, there were actually, I think we had one right down below the treatment plants prior to the wetlands, after the wetlands, as soon as we can get enough flow, because the flow really spreads out in those wetlands to actually take a sample, because it was mostly sheet flow through the wetlands themselves. And then I think at the confluence with La Cienega Creek, and La Bajada was another sampling point. And so the diversion for the La Bajada irrigation district or irrigation or ditch.
Right.
So we had at least 4. There might have actually been one more that I'm not thinking of right now, but we have sampled. And for the most part, I mean, the river is not listed as impaired by the state there for anything but nutrients right now. And when I say it's listed as impaired for nutrients, it also, they're listing it as impaired for dissolved oxygen at the same time and pH, because nutrient concentration affects that. And so,
okay.
But I don't believe the E. coli impairment that's applicable to the upper Santa Fe River is that stretch has not been listed as impaired for E. coli as of yet. But yes, we have sampled, and Mike is sampling on a regular basis for his NPDES permit, at least twice weekly for E. coli, 2 or 3 times.
3 times.
So where are you testing that, Mike?
So those tests are done at the effluent of the plant.
Okay.
So it's not any further into the river or anything. It's trying to just get a baseline and understanding of what's actually being treated through the plant.
Okay.
Which
Alex,
is probably more reflective, because it's going to be highest at the outfall pipe, because E. coli and fecal coliform, when they're subject to UV light and heat, you'll get a decline in concentration unless you have another source coming in.
But then the problem with that when there's too much sediment in the water, right? In terms of the UV working.
That was affecting his discharge. So part of the total suspended solids concentration in his effluent is affecting the UV disinfection.
Okay. Would it make sense to start testing the water at the end of the wetlands on a regular basis?
It would.
Okay, so that may be a goal for us as a group, is to see if we can't encourage that to happen. I'm probably talking to Commissioner Hansen at this point. I don't know, that becomes county land. It's no longer the city land, and that's where it's so important for us to develop Yes.
Thank you for letting me say a few words. So I am well aware of the cost of sampling. And sampling is expensive. And I'm sure Alex will agree with me on this. And that is something that we are going to have to find money to do. From the wastewater plant, you know, from the river. This is a whole river health issue, but the wetlands that is there, the whole idea was to help it clean the water that was coming through from the wastewater plant. So it would be really beneficial, I believe, to be testing. Of course, I am a huge believer of sampling and testing, but the one issue that we're going to have to find is the money to do this.
Anna, excuse me, Carl. I just wanted to mention that if you do begin testing, this is Melissa McDonald. I'm the River and Watershed Coordinator for the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I also run our MS4 permit, which will require in the future, it isn't right now, water testing above the wastewater treatment plant. And we have several locations that have already been selected that coordinate with the state. But if you do testing below the treatment plant, it would be really helpful if you could include me in any results that you find, because we could look at the whole river. You know, it would be helpful to us too.
Absolutely. I mean,
actually, Melissa, I think you have a sampling point that we chose for that permit that's actually down below the confluence with La Cienega Creek.
Yeah, but we're not under contract to test it yet because we're waiting for the new permit, which I have no idea when that permit will be released.
Right.
But yes, I can share those sampling locations with you. I can send it after we get off the call, but then you will know where we're testing. And actually, the county does have that information on it.
So what I could also do is I could send you the information that was collected during that nutrient study. If we were to test for everything, it would be very expensive. And everything, I mean, volatile organic compounds, metals, nutrients, biological oxygen demand. But we could focus on something like E. coli or fecal coliform and nutrients, and at least get those numbers.
And I just want to mention that I saw that Maria Lohman was also on this call from the county. I don't know if there's anybody else from the county on this call, and who, you know, it might be good to maybe talk to John Dupuy also at the water utilities.
we should invite him to these meetings.
That would be a good idea.
Okay.
He is on the list, Carl.
Okay, good.
NMED also has some data that we could send you, and they should be doing another stream assessment sometime within the next, hopefully, year or two.
Okay. Getting back to what Commissioner Hansen mentioned about the wetlands being a part of the process of cleaning the water, which obviously it doesn't do anymore. And that is a concern to us, because obviously it would make sense to have a wetlands that was working to be able to help clean water. And so a couple things that come to mind when we talk about the wetlands. One, do we need to do soil sampling or testing to see what's in the soils? And the other one is the local residential wells. Do we need to be able to provide those people with some sort of test to see what's happening with their wells?
So
I think it would be useful for people to have their wells tested. We actually used to have water fairs that we participated in with NMED, where people could bring in well samples. That hasn't happened in a while, not for the Santa Fe County area. The last one was maybe 2 years ago, I think. And I could check with NMED to see if that's planned in the future.
Okay.
For us to the city to actually test domestic wells, we'd have to get permission to do that, number one. And we'd have to have the money available to do it also.
Right.
If anything, I think a lot of those wells probably have been tested for nitrates in the past, because I know that it's been an issue of concern. The problem with nitrates is we're not sure. I think in the past, nobody was ever sure whether the nitrates were actually originating from the river itself or from people's leach fields, septic tanks and leach fields. And so
absolutely,
that's another indirect contribution that we probably would be concerned about if we ever get nutrient limits for our effluent. We do have nutrient limits, but more stringent nutrient limits, is how much of what NMED is seeing in the river is actually due to the wastewater treatment plant, and how much of it is due to leachate from septic tanks and leach fields. And
is there a way to figure that out?
Yeah, sampling of some of the domestic wells might tell us. I mean, if it's getting into their domestic well, most likely we're getting some influence on the river too.
So we really need to, we've had a water fair, it's been a couple of years for sure, probably longer, but we had a really robust response from people wanting to come in and get their water tested. And the La Cienega Valley Association would be happy to promote that in any way that we can. So that would be great if we can figure that one out for sure.
I'll talk to NMED Drinking Water and see if we can convince them to arrange another one for Santa Fe.
Sounds good.
So if I could, one of the issues here is, sampling is great and you can look through and find everything you're looking for and understand what's in the water going through. But speaking as one of y'all's neighbors.
That's right.
And not necessarily talking for the city or anything, I think a big part also is the wetlands were built but never really maintained. They never went through any kind of best management practices. They weren't a constructed wetland where it was lined, anything of that nature. So you end up getting also invasive species that can get in there of plants, other inputs that could be affecting nutrients, anything else, or even just becoming a sump as it is, kind of referred to right now. So part of the issue would be more going through, testing would be great, but it would only be a baseline, and you can't even call it a wetland right now other than it being a wet piece of land. It's not producing what needs to be done. It doesn't have the right plant species in there that can uptake these nutrients. If it collects any kind of sediment from anything, from rain to the waste plant to just animals, it's not something that can be gauged and say, go in there, look and say, okay, we have way too much sediment has built up, we need to remove some sediment. There's no way to really gauge what's going on in there if it's a spot where, I've walked up the trail from Calle Debra and you really can't even see the water half the time because there's so much overgrowth in there. It's also another piece that I don't know where the funding would end up coming from or how it could be done, but if we really want that area to do what we're thinking it should do, it would really have to be constructed and we'd have to follow best management practices the whole way.
Yeah, this really wasn't constructed as a quote unquote constructed wetland that most people would use for wastewater treatment. It was constructed as a wetland, Yeah. In a constructed wetland that you use to polish your effluent, you usually remove the biomass because that's, you're getting nutrients being taken by the plants. But when those plants just die and add back to the organic matter in the wetland itself, you're just getting a further concentration of all the nutrients and everything that are in that vegetative growth. at a minimum, if say Mike were using that wetland to polish his effluent, he would be removing that vegetation on a yearly basis. I mean, it'll come back the following year, but he would be removing nutrients by doing that. Otherwise, his constructed wetland would lose productivity in the future too. In productivity in terms of being efficient in removing nutrients, and so that's not happening. And I had a question about that plan that was circulated, because I see the plan and I agree that it was probably a good idea, but I'm not sure whoever took responsibility for implementation of that plan, because it's not signed off by like the city saying that we, the city, agree to do these things. And so the plan was put together, but the question is, who had the responsibility for that plan?
Well, this leads us right into the discussion on the management plan for the wetlands. And we've learned a little history thanks to Andy and to Felicity about that, because apparently it was written when the wetlands were first basically installed or constructed. And then I'm probably not using the right terms, but our understanding, there was a huge conflict between the plan and the Air Force, the airport manager. And so there was this political stuff that went on behind the scenes. And eventually it was like the plan got approved at some level, and then it just disappeared. It was politically disappeared. And so, Felicity, do you want to add to that? I don't know if I paraphrased or summarized that very well.
Well, I think that's the basic idea, and actually Dave Grunfeld might have some input too. From what I understand, that's exactly right, Carl. Pete Stacy, who was on the River Commission at the time, was a leader in helping that plan become real. And then he said, yeah, the airport and the mayor at the time, Dave Koss, basically shelved it because it had some undesirable implementation plans, and they didn't want anything to do with it, so they shelved it.
Just excuse me, Carl. I just want to clarify something because of the words that you're using. The River Commission is an advisory body to the governing body. So there was no official approval. They just recommend.
Gotcha.
And so if it never was given to the governing body, there was no approval done. It was just, if the River Commission voted on it, which I don't have a record of, but if they did, and I believe, Jerry Jacoby, who was on the River Commission at the time, if they did vote on that, it would have been a recommendation, and actually it would need to go through the governing process, all the committees, to be an approval, okay? And also, I'm new to the city, 5 years, and I was never told about this plan or didn't have a copy of it. So that just kind of gives you a sense of the level of commitment there on that, because I never had even seen the plan.
Now, Melissa, would you be interested in helping to set up a management plan for the wetlands?
It is currently, I think, being looked at through a NEPA process. So I would need to be instructed by the city manager to do that.
Okay. Because one of the feelings we have out here in the boondocks is that the city sometimes thinks the river ends at the wastewater treatment plant. And so we would be welcome any contribution or any ability to assist us in figuring out what we can do to manage that wetlands. And it's not just the nutrient sump, but it's also the beaver, which has been a major issue for the farmers and ranchers down below. And so, again, this is one of those moments in time, and Melissa, I really appreciate you being here. It's really nice to see you. But this is one of those moments where if we really get ourselves together and really work together, maybe we can start making a change that really will improve the health of this river. And I think that's what we're all after, and that's what we all want in our own way. And there's, again, a host of challenges and things that we need to address, but working together, I'm absolutely confident we can really make some strides in moving forward. And as Commissioner Hansen said, it's going to be expensive. We understand that, And we'll see where that money comes from, given all of the financial trauma our entire country is going through right now. But who knows? I mean, let's work together, figure out stuff, and start looking at costs and seeing what we can do. And I think what you said,
Carl?
yes.
So this is Commissioner Hansen again. Thank you, Melissa, for being here. So I'm also sit on the Santa Fe River Commission. And I have brought this up to the chair, and I think that we each have our own area of concern, but I think that this needs to start being brought up at the River Commission, because they need to, if they're a recommending body to the city, we need to start recommending that the city start looking at what's happening below the wastewater plant. And so I think that is one of the processes that we can begin to implement, that, you know, it's not money, but it starts bringing it to the attention of the governing body that this is a serious issue.
Now, one of the things that Councilor Rivera suggested or talked about at our last meeting when we had, was just Felicity, Andy, and I met with Mike and Efren and Alex and Councilor Rivera, was the idea of a county city stakeholder group to I guess, support what the River Commission wants to do with the river, or the ideas or thoughts that come out of the River Commission. So what do you think about that?
I think, thank you. I think that, you know, as I have been on the Santa Fe County Commission, I have encouraged and endorsed joint working together. It's sometimes easier at staff level between the county and the city than it is between policymakers, but it does need to be talked about on both sides by the policymakers also.
Cool.
I'd like to just say something real quick. This is Zoe Isaacson. I was a former chair of the River Commission. I now work for the city. You know, as I was on the commission maybe 4 or about 5 years, and your meetings were brought up in some of our meetings, but I would just like to encourage that if you want the River Commission's involvement in these meetings, and also in some of your maybe smaller meetings with counselors and whatnot, I would just highly encourage that you guys reach out personally to the River Commission chair and invite them. You know, in my 4 years there, we, you know, had talked about your meetings, but we had never really communicated directly with you guys, or had a real, I guess, you know, just personal relationship or anything. So I would just highly encourage, if that's something that you want, then to try to bridge that gap and make that effort.
Absolutely. Great idea. And thank you very much. You got a very cute son back there. So.
Oh, thank you.
You know, thank you, Zoe, for that. I might remind folks that at one point we brought the River Commission out to do a tour of the Santa Fe and that wetlands area, and just sort of all the things below the wastewater treatment plant. Remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. We should do it again.
And maybe it's time to do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, Felicity, I think myself and Phil Bouvet are the senior members of the River Commission, and all the other river commissioners are new and fairly naive about the issues below the wastewater plant.
Yeah, so we could do another tour. I think it would be great. We always enjoy those, and we'll
absolutely. And we can get to. We'll go to El Cañon, we'll go down to Tres Rios Ranch. We can show you where the La Cienega Creek and Bonanza Creek, all those come together at one place at Tres Rios. So that'd be kind of a cool place to take everybody and kind of show you what's going on.
Yeah, show the wetlands and show Kaya Deborah. I mean, just show them all.
Yeah,
everything.
absolutely.
Right. Okay, we'll organize that for.
Yeah, we'll figure that one out, and everybody's invited.
So one other thing I want to mention is that at the moment, the River Commission has not met because we do not have access to a Zoom meeting at the city. But I do think that we could, it would be a good thing for the River Commission to actually make this maybe one of their meetings, since we can't meet in person or we can't meet via Zoom. This would be a way to gather people together. I think we would still have to respect the social distancing and wear masks, or as we move it back into opening up the state, to pay attention to all of those, all of the issues that we are dealing with COVID-19.
Hey, Anna, I just want to correct you again, just to make sure there's not misinformation for in general. We do have access to Zoom meetings. We are not authorized to call meetings right now. And it's not just the River Commission, it's a lot of the committees, because we're trying to limit exposures. And thank you for mentioning that we, of course, would, you know, have appropriate protocols and all of that. But we could call a special meeting, which we don't need to have a stenographer for, and put that out to the committee with no problem. So that wouldn't be a problem. Thank you.
I just posted the draft report by Peter Stacy.
I can't hear you, David.
I'm not muted.
There you are. There you are.
Okay.
Just with your little low voice.
Okay, I just posted the draft management plan from 2008. Maybe that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, we found it actually. Andy found it in the Watershed archives. And so we've got a handle on that now. But back to the tour, I think that would be really a good thing to do. And courtesy of Carol and Kier, we get a little trip down to El Cañon. You can see the old Rael Ranch. We get down to Tres Rios Ranch, which is the largest organic farm in Santa Fe County at 24 acres. And I've got access to that. So it would be a fun thing. Again, Felicity and I will start planning that and again, invite everyone to come along. Maybe we'll get a bus. We can't use buses. You can't do that now. Anyway, we'll figure out a way to get together and with masks on and care of things. So cool.
Carl, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So this is Councilor Romero-Wirth. Sorry, I meant to interject earlier, but for some reason you couldn't hear me when I was on by a phone.
Okay.
And I, just want to, one, let you know that I'm on this call, and two, I think it's a great idea to start to understand kind of the financial needs, but with the understanding, again, that the city's financial picture right now is not good and probably won't be very good for some time to come. So just wanted to reemphasize that and completely support Melissa in the clarifications that she's been making with regard to the city. And also want to say to all of you and with Commissioner Hansen, we have been trying to, at least with the Water Policy Advisory Board and the Water Conservation Committee, build some dialogue and relationships between the county and the city. So I take issue with, the characterization that it's sometimes easier to deal between staff than between policymakers. I mean, but we all have, we all operate within certain constraints, and I do think that, we all have the best intentions to do what's good and right for all the different constituencies. So, but realizing that we all come from this from different angles. So, Carl, it's good to see you, and just wanted to, make my presence known. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and give my best to Peter. Yeah, thank you so much, Commissioner Romero-Wirth. Again, going back to what we've been talking about, this is an opportunity in a moment. I think it's not just us either. I think it's throughout the world in a sense, an opportunity for us to start looking at ways to improve the world around us. And obviously the river has been our focal point for quite a while. And to get this group of people together to be able to share this kind of information is so valuable and important. And again, this is one, you've heard this many times from me before, but this is my favorite group to meet with because we have such a wealth of knowledgeable, concerned, passionate people that get together. And you can't stop that energy. I mean, so this is, again, a moment in time where I think we really have an opportunity to do something pretty special. So, Andy, do we want to head into the subcommittee now? So we're going to have a tour where Melissa suggested sometime in July, which would be fine. And we'll coordinate it, and maybe even the La Cienega Valley Association will come up with some snacks or something that we can do. We maybe meet at the end of the tour and have a little chat. We'll see how things are going at that point. But that's part of the plan. So Andy, I'm very excited. This is something Andy has been crusading for quite a while, is our subcommittee, our education subcommittee. And so it's an important element, I think, of what the collaborative needs to be doing. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Andy and let him talk a little bit about the subcommittee.
Cool. Thanks, Carl. So what the notion is to create a subcommittee, not to make decisions, but really to help with communications, things like this, things of getting the word out when Ephraim and Mike have sent out their missives, to get it out to everybody right away. And so we're setting that up as we speak. And it's also to develop and hold, if you want, the resources that we have. David, you had mentioned that the 2008 River Commission report, but there was also a 2010 update of that. So that, for instance, is on our website now. So what we did at the Watershed Association, we created a page for the Santa Fe River Traditional Communities Collaborative. We'll put these, the links to these meetings on there and any other resources we get. So we have one collected place. And the idea is we're not going to be acting on them per se, but we're going to be giving them out so everybody can see them, is the idea as we find them. And any reports, Alex, that you have that you can send to us too, we'll plot them on our website. That's pretty cool. So that's the intent with this education committee. It's kind of a more focused group. We've set it up, and I haven't got it in front of me, but it was, you know, with certain aspects like the city and the county, landowners from the La Cienega Valley and the lower river. So that's the idea with this. It's kind of a working group and just kind of really compiling different pieces of information and having them in a public place, and then letting Carl know and everybody know that they're there, so we have access to it all. One of the things that we're working on now, matter of fact, Olivia was part of it, is a video. We're doing this with the city as part of our My Water, My Watershed. What do we do these days? We can't take them up, so we have videos. So we should actually, this week, we hope to finish up a video of the watershed led by none other than Luke Thompson throughout the watershed. And then we also, Olivia was barged in on. Thank you, Olivia, for letting us do that. And so anyway, that's the idea, is to try and present a whole picture of the watershed, and that'll be available on you as well. So that's our notion of it. It's kind of a subcommittee, a small working group to try and put this stuff together.
How do we want to recruit members for that?
You know, I would say just let me know on those things if you'd like to be involved. And then again, it's kind of a small group, doesn't need to be, you know, this huge, like this collaborative. So we'll just kind of go, okay, well, here's what we're working on. What do you got?
It's almost like a little research group.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the idea. And that's why we called it an education committee. And is the idea to just kind of compile materials for the education of the larger group. Yeah.
Thank you again for doing that. Do you want to talk about your grants?
Sure. Well, it leads right into one that we did get a Water Smart Bureau of Reclamation grant to do phase 1 work for a watershed plan. This is pretty cool. This will be starting this fall, winter. And the idea, part of that phase 1 is to collect the resources and also to work with the stakeholders. And we've got consultants lined up for that. And so this is phase 1 of a potential watershed plan. And the hope is that we'll keep moving on and maybe get a phase 2 or more. So anyway, that's the initial one. And then we also just got a grant from New Mexico Ag Department to do some healthy soils initiative work classes. And so we have selected Southwest Urban Hydrology. It's going to be, originally it was in person. We've switched it over now to do it online, if you will, or in video format. And the idea is to talk about the soils in different parts of the watershed. We end up at Lenora Curtin as our final spot.
That's a pretty cool little place.
Yeah.
Jennifer, do you think Ryan Mann's study could be part of this?
Oops.
Is she here? Oh, sorry. Unmute her.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. I think it could be part of it with the understanding that, yeah, like with any study, the data that he collected was within that one water year from the fall of 2018 to the fall of 2019. And so the data that he was collecting in regards to stream flow at the sites and those various parameters, the physical and chemical parameters like pH and temperature, to look at those for the times during which they were collected. Recall too that he also took grab samples just twice for a comprehensive set of analytes, most of which were below the detection limit, and the few that came in as detectable were ones that were typical of that sometimes did come up, were detectable, but often had taste or other kinds of aesthetics, but nothing that was really influential or really detrimental to water quality.
I did a very poor job of introducing you. This is Jennifer Lindline, who's a professor at Highland University. She had a grad student, Ryan Mann, who spent the year doing that study. And we're very hopeful you might have another student who would be interested in continuing to help us with the river issues. So we're open to that without question, but I really want to thank you and thank Ryan for all that gathering of information. Again, it's that 1 year. And so each year is different, but you and I have had this conversation before, and the importance of having science-based decision-making is something we really need to move forward to, and understanding the political side of things and the financial side of stuff, but they're really, in terms of moving things forward, really has to be science-based. And so that's what I believe is the future of the river, is we make sure that we're making good decisions based on science. But thank you for being here today. Nice to see you as always.
I'll throw in something too. I sent a email to Ryan via High Desert Anglers to see possible, because I know he try to see him. And if we could put that up on the website, we'd love to. I don't know the status of it and stuff.
He did complete his thesis and confer his degree. Everything has been signed and sealed and formatted with the library. There's a little bit of a slowness in the pipeline to print and bind things because of the social distancing, but it's in the queue, and once it's printed and bound, individuals can check it out of the library, or I'm pretty sure Ryan actually paid for an additional copy to provide to you, Carl.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you very much. That is wonderful.
Jennifer, isn't that
Tom,
available
thank
as a PDF from the university?
It should be once all those other things are finished. But yeah, it should be available like that, the electronic version.
Okay, because usually it's open access and easy to get.
Okay, yes.
So we're on to other matters, I think. Andy, you done?
I'm done.
Okay, other matters? Anybody have other matters? I've got one. So obviously I've had too much time on my hands. And I have this crazy idea of one of the things that we didn't talk about, and that's the role of springs in La Cienega and how it contributes to the health of the river. And all of you know that we've had issues with that. And the biggest issue we've had is the proliferation of residential wells in La Cienega. I mean, we've had what I call the lot split subdivision that's happened over the last 20, 25 years that's added somewhere between 400 and 500 homes to our community, each one of them with a well. And so our local acequias have been impacted, both of them. And I'm putting together some ideas and hopefully it'll evolve into a plan on how to restore the springs of La Cienega. And I'm an idealist at heart, and I truly think that if there are certain things that we can do, one of the biggest things is being able to get people onto county water. And that, talk about expensive, we understand that, but it's something that needs to be done and something that can be done. But there are other short-term things, and one of the things we want to do is the Adopt Arroyo program that Andy has done so well with in Santa Fe. We want to adopt it out in La Cienega. And there's some other things, catchment systems, all those kinds of things are things that we want to, as a community, to start basically sharing with residents so we can start figuring out how we can contribute to getting that river back to its healthy status. I mean, some of the old timers will tell you that the La Cienega Creek in its heyday had as much water in it as the Santa Fe River, which sounds crazy, but I can tell you, I think it's pretty accurate. I mean, Ed Siri has a spring on his property that in the old days produced almost 800 gallons of water a minute. It's a trickle now. And so those are kinds, can we reverse those kinds of things? And that's what I want to put together a fairly, in fact, for the next meeting, I'll have kind of an outline of that plan and the different steps we could take to see if we can't add our community's effort in terms of getting the river back to a healthy state of being. So that's where I'm at. Again, any other matters from folks?
I have a question, and I don't know if Councilor Romero-Wirth is still on, but I was wondering if anybody, if she might be able to give us an update on the pipeline, the wastewater pipeline.
I am still here. I don't, hold on a second. Trying to find my video. There it is. Sorry about the hat. Haven't had a haircut in 3 months.
Here.
And you, Carl, you don't have to worry about that.
Well, not as much for sure.
So your hat's for a different reason.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what's happening with the pipeline. There may be city staff on this call who are in a better position to answer that right now. Certainly you know, we're going through a budgeting process right now, and we have a $100 million deficit. I don't know what that's going to mean to long-term capital projects. I think that's all the kinds of things that we're looking at right now. So I don't know, but it's a good question, and I'll certainly check in on that. I've had a couple other things eating up my time lately.
No worries. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I think Andrew Erdman. Andrew?
Yeah, and actually, I don't have a tremendous amount to say about the pipeline, but the reason for that is that we've been putting a lot of time into some planning projects that are going to be going forward. And I don't know exactly how that's going to play out now because of, you know, we're doing everything differently, but the water division has really been working on taking a step back and doing, I think it's a 40-year plan that they're working on. And so they've got some planning experts involved in that, and they're working on doing some meetings. So we'll make sure to keep this group up to speed as that goes forward, because I know you've got opinions and have been thinking about this stuff. So we'll make sure you're in the loop.
Thank you, Andrew.
And Carl, what I could say is that I've been working with the Bureau of Reclamation on the scope of services that would be necessary to complete the NEPA process for that pipeline. And so the Bureau of Reclamation would be the lead on that NEPA process. And so I've taken the lead on negotiating the scope of services with them.
Okay, sounds good. Our concern obviously is we hear that the water coming out of the wastewater treatment plant will be reduced by half. And so that's always going to be a worry or a concern for us. So that's down the road, and we can talk about that at a later time, but it's something that as community leaders we've discussed and are concerned about. So thank you, Alex, as always.
Real quick, I just want everybody to know that no one is saying that those wetlands are not functioning properly. And I'm sure Olivia is going to be glad to hear me say this, because she's probably been biting her tongue. The wetlands are doing what wetlands do. And the thing is, nobody plans necessarily to have something like a non-constructed wetland in the path of wastewater treatment plant effluent with no additional flows coming downstream from upstream, except on an occasional or ephemeral basis. I mean, if we had constant river flows, there may not be a problem down below.
Absolutely.
But the wetlands are doing what wetlands do, and that's take up nutrients and other contaminants from the water, including metals, and concentrating them in vegetative growth and in the soils. And so what happens is that as the water flows through, it picks up some of those nutrients in the dissolved form and in total form because of the sediment erosion out of the wetlands and the organic matter. I think, I guess it's Janice was talking about constituents that cause taste and odor. Well, that's total organic carbon or dissolved organic carbon. And we deal with that even at our water treatment plants, but those constituents cause taste and odor problems. And we did see high TOC and high DOC in the river. And so, but it's just organic carbon, which would be natural in wetlands. And so in a typical natural system, you know, the continuous river flows would flush that out of the wetlands. And so
we don't have that because of how the river gets so slowed down. And one of the things that Ed isn't, his microphone isn't working, but he mentioned the reason that the airport manager was against, or what he wanted to do, he was concerned about the beaver creating ponds that migratory birds would come in and cause problems for airplanes. And so the airport manager wanted the ability to just go shoot the beaver. So probably got hung up just a little bit in terms of what was going on. Again, I just am always so pleased to be part of this and to play some role in this organization and group. It's a commitment I take seriously, and I deeply appreciate the opportunity. Felicity and I have done this now for 8 years. And it's something that's a great cause. And bring this group of people together now. And I'm smiling at all the faces I see and thank everybody. One of the things we have not talked about, and something that we need to talk about going forward, are the nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals that aren't tested for right now, that may be concerning long-term. But that's down the road, and obviously it's not a requirement by anybody at this point to test for those things, or they have the ability to test. But those will be long-term concerns of ours. But Alex, you're right. I mean, the nutrient sump is just full. It's overloaded, and it doesn't create that same ability. And again, it comes down to flow. If you had the flow going through there, that would make all the difference in the world. But right now it's just spread out and slowed down. and the amount of damage that the beaver have done to the restoration project, actually a demonstration project that the Wild Earth Guardians did, is immense. And so it's just this ongoing concern. Oh, that's a great one. I just got from Melissa. I hope we continue to use the Zoom format because I think we get more participation. I am sold on this, folks. This is a great opportunity for us just to sit and chat and have an opportunity to share things. And Bobby, we'll look forward to the future reports on some of the things that you've come up with in terms of dealing with the pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals and things.
Carl, I haven't done anything to deal with the pharmaceuticals.
Well, you have some ideas in terms of natural ways to take stuff out of the water.
Well, Michael pointed out that the plants that are in the wetland systems, there need to be specific plants that need to be put in there. I don't know what those are, but I mean, I imagine that Michael might, and Alex and people who are paid to do this kind of work could actually do that research and come up with a way to do it. So that would be amazing.
I have a question. Sorry, Bobby.
Yes. No, go ahead.
It's not really testing, but it was back, and I don't know the woman's name, but you were speaking about Ryan's project.
It's Jennifer Lindline, Professor at Highlands.
Thank you. And for all of you who have contributed to the conversation. But something I heard about for a few years was Ryan's project, and he was going to measure the water further downstream, several points, to really have some data about the actual flow of water, which is a huge part of this conversation. And I've never heard if that's been done and what the findings were. We do know that the wetlands do slow the flow of water, right? There was a term for it because it spreads it out.
Yeah.
So I just want real data there. I've never heard it, and I don't know if that's ever happened.
It has. And that's what Jen.
Right, it did happen, Kathleen. That's what we were talking about a little earlier. It was in the end of April that Ryan defended his thesis. So we're just trying to get that into a format to provide for the collaborative. But he did identify from the wastewater treatment plant downward or downstream, several places where the stream was gaining and several places where the river is losing, and prepared an overall water budget.
And did he test it at different times, like when the golf course is being watered and, just seasonally?
Yes.
I look forward to seeing that. Thank you.
The data points were what, every 15 seconds or something? Amazing.
Every 15 minutes of the day throughout that whole year. So a lot of aggregating data, averaging, deciding, days and weeks and months to have manageable numbers. But yeah, there was a lot of data.
A heck of a lot of detail.
Would it be all right if I chimed in for just a second?
Sure.
You guys were talking about trying to find information and data that could potentially help with this, and I'm sure many of you are aware, but just in case you're not, the girls' school actually goes down to the preserve at least once a month during the school year, usually every week, and collects data from the water. I don't know which nutrients in particular you guys are interested in, but we do test for nitrate and phosphate and dissolved oxygen. And that data is all publicly available. It's uploaded to RiverSource, Rich Schrader's group. And Andy, I think you might have a link to that maybe you could put on your website so that people could look and see. And we have data going back, a good 10, 12, 15 years that might help as you try and figure out what's going on here. And we're happy to share that if it's useful. I also just quickly was going to ask Alex, I'm still new to this and still trying to figure out these issues. When you say flow, are you referring to volume or the speed at which the water is moving? What is flow?
Actually, both. Obviously, if you have, impeded flow, and you have water sitting in the wetlands and taking on dissolved concentrations of nutrients, that's an effect also. The longer water is in contact with a soluble form of nutrients, the more nutrients are going to solubilize. But I'm also talking about upstream flow, which quote unquote would not be impacted by nutrients, in the minds of the New Mexico Environment Department. Because right now we have no, I mean, we're 100% effluent dependent in the stream down below the wastewater treatment plant. And so we get no credit for the current flows and the current concentrations of nutrients in the upper Santa Fe River. So everything is attributed to us. And even that's incorrect because there are non-point sources of pollutants, including leach fields and septic tanks and stormwater runoff that contribute nutrients to the stream. And those are not regulated the same way Mike's permit is regulated, Mike and Efren. And so basically NMED is holding us accountable for the total concentration of nutrients in the river down below the wastewater treatment plant. We've told them that's untenable, it's not workable. There's no way in the world we can meet those standards. Even with reverse osmosis, which you don't want to go to reverse osmosis and tear up the stream with aggressive water. But what we're doing with them right now, in fact, we have a meeting next week, is talking about an interim standard, which would take a lot of these into account. Under the Clean Water Act, if a standard cannot be attained, there are certain provisions for interim standards, you know, based on hydrologic modifications of the stream or dams, which obviously we have, the lack of flow caused by man-made causes, modification of the channel, those types of things. If they prevent the attainment of standards, NMED can look at a waiver or a temporary standard is their term for it. And so we're working with them to come up with an acceptable nutrient standard that would still be protective, but at the same time, not result in a $90 million cost to the city of Santa Fe. But when I say flows, I mean both upstream and downstream flows, the amount of flow, the volume of flow, and the velocity of flow.
Hey, Alex, I have a question for you. So this is upriver. There's a gigantic pipe that's been put in over by the treatment plant in Upper Canyon Road. What is that about?
Oh, that's actually the new raw water pipeline going into the road itself. So at Upper Canyon Road, we have a raw water pipeline that runs from Nichols Dam down to the water treatment plant. That pipeline has, since the 1970s when P&M installed it, has always been in the stream channel. And we are now moving it into the road itself. And so that's what you're seeing in terms of that construction, which has been halted because of fire hazards.
Right.
And so that probably won't pick up again until July, August. But it's the raw water pipeline that takes water from Nichols Reservoir down to the water treatment plant.
Okay, so the old one that you're talking about is that rusty one that's over by the that rusty one that's over on top of the old dam. Is that right? The stone dam. There's a rusty pipe that comes.
Oh, that's even older.
Oh, that's something else.
Yeah, so the pipe I'm talking to is like a greenish color pipe that runs down the stream, and then it goes underground into the water treatment plant, right about where you're talking about.
Okay.
And so, but actually we have two pipes in the river right now. The pipe that was installed by P&M in the 1970s, I think it was 1972, actually ruptured 8 years ago when we had that long spell of below zero weather. We were getting down to 18 degrees below. Water in the pipeline actually froze and heaved the pipe. The ground heaved, the pipe broke at its joints, and so to keep water flowing, we had to put a temporary pipe, which was a form of flexible plastic, and it's a black pipe. And so we had to run that up the stream channel to Nichols and then into the pipeline at the point where it turns, almost makes a 90-degree turn into the water treatment plant. So at the end of the installation of the new pipeline, the goal is to get both of those, the temporary pipe and the former permanent pipe, out of the stream channel itself, which is going to be a massive effort.
Okay.
And then and hopefully restore and mitigate any damage we do at the time.
Okay. One more question for you, which is that I know the city has no money, so it's really clear. But I mean, in talking about the wetlands, wouldn't it not be helpful, or wouldn't it be helpful to bring someone in who has dealt with waste water to consult with you all about what is possible, rather than going ahead and, you know, and saying, well, this doesn't work and we need to pull that out. And but there are, you know, plant-based raft systems that can be put in, you know, right below the wastewater treatment plant where the water comes out, where the effluent comes out. There are things like that that can happen. So is it even remotely possible for somebody to come in and to consult with the city, with you and Michael and the folks at the treatment plant? Alex?
Certainly it would, but at the same time, and Mike can talk about this, they had Carollo engineers come in and do an extensive study on their treatment process itself, in terms of looking at better ways to remove nutrients and actually new treatment units that could be installed to further remove nutrients. And actually some of those treatment processes would also provide oxidation of pharmaceuticals and things like that. So they would actually reduce some of the other contaminants of concern that were brought up here. And so Mike has that study, it was finalized. And so Carollo did do a study mainly focusing on the wastewater treatment plant itself. But I believe, Mike, that there was even the idea of artificial wetlands.
I believe there was some information in there. There was a conversation on another process that could possibly help, but I think most of it kept returning back to membrane filtration or chemical removal of most of those constituents. I don't really know how much more the city could really do going that way after passing the bridge, because then it starts getting into that murky water of you know if you have the money or not, but then also the part that if it's not city property, then there may not be any kind of, you know, stakeholder to go into it. That's what it's a real complicated piece there.
Huh. Okay.
That question.
And certainly if we, you know, in other situations, and people have brought this up, you know, to do further removal of nutrients, people have looked at constructed and quote unquote managed wetlands. And so that is, I mean, if we could, you know, if there's other groups, I think even NMED would provide some technical assistance on that. We could certainly look at that as another option below the wastewater treatment plant. But the real emphasis right now is meeting at the end of pipe limits of what we discharge to the treatment plant, from the treatment plant. And so unfortunately we had to focus on that because the current permit has actually stepped down the nutrient limit for Mike. And so he's had to meet that new limit. And it's fairly low. It's actually, it's kind of ironic because I've gone to meetings and webinars and where people in Colorado and other states are talking about their temporary standard of 10 on total, actually inorganic nitrogen and inorganic phosphorus. And we're meeting 3 on total nitrogen and total phosphorus. And I'm like, you guys are complaining about this? I mean, it's like, our treatment plant is already on a regular basis, at least 85, 95% of the time. I think we actually negotiated this with NMED and we said we can meet this limit at least, you know, what did we use? I forget, the upper 5th percentile. And so I think it's we're in the 95th percentile in terms of how efficiently we can meet those total nitrogen and total phosphorus limits. And so Olivia, actually, if the girls' school can take total nitrogen and total phosphorus numbers, that would be great, because we've actually asked for inorganic to be put in our permit, but NMED refuses to use inorganic.
Olivia, who does the testing for you?
We use equipment that's given to us by New Mexico Game and Fish as part of our collaborative effort down there. But the students do it with the oversight of teachers.
Okay. Do you let the girls touch the water?
With gloves and hand sanitizer following. And we've become
Gotcha.
extra vigilant about that in the last year and a half.
Understood.
Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, so one of my thoughts, and this is something Melissa McDonald brought up, is we need these meetings are pretty cool, and I agree completely. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't go, considering what's going on, to a monthly, but rather than a bi-monthly meeting. So let's think about that. I think that these kinds of Zoom meetings allow us to do that and not take so much time out of our day. And so I'm going to encourage that. Felicity and I will talk and we'll discuss this, but I think we're going to go back, or I'm going to suggest we go back to the second Thursday of each month, 10 o'clock. We get together and start talking. And again, I will say this over and over again, and there's new people, new faces. And again, it's my favorite group to be around. We all are committed to something, and we all come from different angles and have different challenges and different ideas. But if we keep pushing this, maybe we can do something really significant. So unless somebody else has anything, I'm going to call this to an end.
I have one question.
Sure. Yes.
Where might I find where in the area of these wetlands that we're talking about? Because I'm really not clear where they are.
Well, it starts at the right below.
Is there a map or something? Is there anything on the website, Andy? Or
I don't think there is. Andy?
We don't have a map, but doesn't mean we can't put one on there. But as Carl was saying, it's just below the bridge, below the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay.
And running down.
Where does it end?
Down over there. Well, that's a good question. The Wild Earth Guardians piece, I believe, ended at Calle Deborah. Was that? I'm looking at Lee or Olivia.
I don't know. That's a great question, Carol. We'll figure that one out and get some sort of map or some sort of definition as to exactly what that is.
Great, thank you.
At one point, we talked about maybe doing a drone map of the river, which would be kind of cool. Anyway, that's a whole different idea.
When I drive down there, I see all the cattails coming up. And since those cattails love those high nutrient loads, it gives me an idea how far those high nutrients go along the Santa Fe River, though. But
got it, Pat. Patricia, that's for sure.
Also, I did want to mention on the pipeline, back to Bobby's question, up on Upper Cerro Gordo or Upper Canyon Road, we did just install a meter 2 weeks ago. Just during this furlough situation, we're having a hard time having our operators go down and physically meet the readers. And so now we did an automatic reader on the meter. That way we get our information through SCADA. That way we're not having to go down physically and read the meter. We're getting it automatically now.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just mention something? Because I've been getting a lot of questions about like hazardous pollutants. Mike in his permit, Mike and Efren in their NPDES permit have a requirement to test their effluent for whole effluent toxicity. And they've met all those tests. In other words, we did not have a die-off of aquatic life as is used in what they call the wet test, whole effluent toxicity. And so we are not discharging hazardous pollutants that we know to the stream. He also has to test for metals and things like that. So there should be no concentrations of real concern in the stream channel itself. If we're not discharging them, unless they're coming from upstream and stormwater runoff and things like that, which we mostly see contribute like organic waste, most of those stormwater flows, and E. coli and things like that. We shouldn't have any concentration of hazardous pollutants, and we might have some concentration, but not above toxic levels.
We're actually doing whole effluent toxicity testing today, so we may have that information in about 3 weeks. because the samples are sent out to, they're overnighted out to a facility, I believe in Texas, that's doing it.
Okay, cool. Look forward to that information. Maybe you can make a report of that at the next meeting.
Well, if we get the information back by then, it's,
Gotcha. Understood.
COVID has thrown everything into a whirl.
You better believe it. Wow. Okay. Anything else, folks? Thank you all. And again, this is something that is of great importance to all of us, and I really appreciate everybody's participation. And it looks like we're really at a moment in time of something significant. And it goes beyond just this water stuff. It goes in our entire world, which has gone upside down in the last 3 or 4 months. So stay safe, wear your mask, and let's get on the other side of this virus stuff. In the meantime, thank you all for coming today or being part of this. It's been a godsend, and I am thrilled. And I'm sure I share this with Felicity, that we're so proud to be a part of this and to help lead this. And thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Andy, again for the Watershed for hosting this. And we look forward to more conversations and working to figure out how to fix the river. So thanks to all. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you.